Hello and good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us this lovely Friday morning as we go into another great little webinar here. This is the second part of our AutoLISP webinar series here that Jeremiah Farmer is going to be presenting. My name is Jake. I will be moderating here, answering your guys' questions as they come in. Please recognize a few things there on your screen. In the upper left corner, you're going to see the Q&A box that is going to be geared towards all of the questions that you guys have so we can get those answered. And then we've got the chat window as well. So any other banter you guys want to have back and forth, that will go there. If you guys want to minimize your screen just to get out of that full screen mode, up in the top right corner is going to be where you can minimize that as well. So with that, again, kick this off right over to Jer and hold on because it's going to be really, really cool.
Thanks, Jake. All right, well, let's get going. For this little sequel to the first one, I was searching bad movie sequel titles, and that's where I came up with that. But let's see what we're gonna get going about. That's me there. I'm the one on the right. But self-taught with this AutoLISP thing. I've been doing it for 20 plus years, and my big takeaway as you're following along and considering what you're going to do is, it's a language like any language. The best is going to be if you can use it every day. But specifically being a programming language, it's still antiquated at times. A lot of other programming languages have kind of blown past AutoLISP. And so you just want to make sure that the project that you're using it for is well suited for it. And you'll get a sense for that, what we're going to show today. That'd be my big advice to you. Today, we'll recap very quickly, and then we're going to get more into lists and then selection sets and loop design. I got to touch on ribbons very, very briefly. In my test of this, it was running a little over an hour, so I'm going to breeze through the ribbon stuff to try to save a little time today. So I'm sorry if you're hoping for a little more of that, but I am still going to show the important basics of that. But the tool we're going to make today, an actual real live tool, and all of the things I'm showing will be available with the recorded version of this webinar. So don't worry about asking that. But yeah, the code that we're creating will be available for download. But we're going to make a really kind of a standard loop, a standard entity processing loop. Kind of the real backbone of a lot of AutoLISP work. Things we're not going to get into that we're still kind of putting off for future sessions is things like dialog boxes and cloud data, which of course that can really expand your tool, give it a lot of teeth. And the dynamic mouse movement is a great ability of AutoLISP, and so that's a good example of something that's more advanced, but also well suited for Lisp. So if those are things you do want, if you like this session, let us know, or if there's also other things, kind of let us know where you might want to see this AutoLISP webinar series go. So let's get into our recap. Remember, Lisp itself is just simply the language of mathematics, which means I can explain it to you in less than 15 seconds. A statement like 2 plus 2 is just going to be encapsulated in parentheses. Everything is encapsulated in parentheses. The argument is first, and the operands are after it. So 2 plus 2 becomes that, which means I can have any number of arguments to it. And I can now do a very simple variable assignment, set q being the statement to set a quoted value is the way to kind of think of how to remember it, but that's a radius. It's as if I'm quoting the letters to now be a quoted value. But anyway, from here, this point out, the variable named radius is set to the contents of these parentheses here, which is 2 plus 2 plus 9 plus 7, which is 20. So it's the basics of Lisp right there, and basics of AutoLISP. As I mentioned last time, there are only 4 data types in AutoLISP, which make it very flexible. We've got Boolean, true or nil. I've got integers, real numbers, and strings. There are technically these other three entity types, if you really want to get technical about it. You can have a list. A list is just an arbitrary collection of any of these entity types on the left. So that's why I feel it's not necessarily a true data type. But see, this list is a list of three real numbers. So a list could also include lists. But there's these other two, which is what we're getting into today. Entity name is the only way I can access entities in the drawing. So that's where kind of a Lisp becomes AutoLISP, is I have to interface with now AutoCAD. And similarly, a selection set that lets me grab, as you can imagine, a selection set is a collection of entity names. It's exactly what it is. So we're going to use that to process the entities in a drawing. So lists, as I mentioned, lists is just a collection of data types. In this case, this is a list of 4 integers. This is a list of 3 real numbers. So even though that is how you assemble a point, that's how you access a point, that's how you create one, send one to AutoCAD, everything, it is just a list of 3 real numbers. So I'm not declaring a point as you would in many other programming languages. I'm just creating a list of 3 real numbers. I can do lists within lists, and that's important because I have this dotted pair, and it's a very efficient way to organize an arbitrary data object. And in fact, that's exactly how AutoCAD presents objects. For instance, this is a definition of a line. The 0 code you can see here lets me know, oh, it's a line. 67 code, it's in model space. The 8 code is layer. So it's a line in model space on layer 0. The only other data for a line is, of course, its start point and its end point, the 10 code and the 11 code. This is everything I would need if I was to access a line in the model or to create one on the fly. So let's look at how we kind of create lists. The first is just simply the function list itself, which takes any number of arguments and spits out an actual list. It's the simplest way to create a list. Pretty easy to remember that one, huh? Well, how do I string them together? So this is very important, is I'm going to use append. By using append, passing any number of lists to it, as you can see, it will append them together. But here's the important thing about it, and it's a little bit of a mind warp at first. So I remember I struggled learning this initially, but the way to think about it is, see, I have this list of 4 members, and I want to add something to the end of it. So if I append to that list, it's like I have to take the new member and I have to kind of elevate him to being a list first, and then I can append him to the end of it. And how that works in a more common usage, more real case, is I have a variable named myList, which of course is that list. Now, if I want to add a new value onto the end of it, I have to do this. So we kind of read this from the inside out, right? I have my new member that I want to add. I elevate that to a list, and then I can append it after my list. And so that's where append is. But this is, I believe it's a by reference, not by value language. I hope I don't have that confused. But notice, for instance, by just simply saying append my list with this new member list 5, that didn't actually change the variable my list. I have to take the result of this append and then feed that to the setQ statement. So now my variable myList is equal to the original value plus the new value, like that. And I know you're like, oh, wow, that's wild. I can set a variable to the variable plus some other stuff. It almost feels at first like it's not going to crash or anything if I do that. No, that's actually it. very, very common. That's exactly how we're going to create and add to a list. So I hope that was very, very clear. And I want to touch very, very briefly on these dotted pair lists. We're not so much going to use this too much today, but it's just a great moment to discuss it. There's only one way to create one of these dotted pairs. To get that dot, you can't, for instance, like it seems like it'd be nice to just simply say list, why can't I just say list distance dot 3.5? But no, you can't. Whatever. You have to use cons, which is short for construct. I'm going to make a construct being a dotted pair construct. And this is really kind of the best way to do it. And that's just what I'm showing you very much a best practices of this is even though, remember the way AutoCAD uses these dotted pairs very commonly in entity definition is with an integer and then the dot and then a value. Better is with a string. And so here's a great example. I have this just arbitrary list and it has 3 dotted pairs and I'm creating all at once. Distance is 3.5. Entity is, of course, this entity name, and insertion, which is undoubtedly the insertion point. But you can see I have this arbitrary data object, and I'm kind of storing all of this information in it in a very ad hoc sense. And it's very easy for me to work with. For instance, I can use the ASOC function for associative search, because once I create one of these, this is what's called an associative list. And so ASOC distance of that list returns, unfortunately, the entire dotted pair. So as you can imagine, if I searched it for the distance pair, I know the first member is distance. It's kind of a little unfortunate nuance of it, but we'll get around that easily enough. But what this means is, with only 3 things, it's like, yeah, whatever. But obviously, when you get more and more of these just pieces of information you want to keep track of and keep together, I can do this without having to, for instance, create 3 different variables that then have all the variable naming restrictions. For instance, I can't name a variable distance because there is a AutoLISP function named distance. And so by doing this, it helps me avoid that, have kind of cleaner names to my ad hoc data that I need to work with. And it's just a real dream to work with, certainly compared to doing the same thing in any other language. Array functions are far more difficult to work with than the list processing functions in AutoLISP. So that was that. So now we're going to talk about a control list. So I'm going to make this kind of specific for our challenge of the day. Remember, we want to select a block, and we want to find all the other blocks in the drawing. And so we want to basically process the entities in a drawing and do something with that, and so the way to think about it is, right, I'm going to have all the entities in a drawing and then my end result. So in between I'm going to make what I would call a control list. I want a list of the entities, a list of the good entities, or the entities I care about. And I want to, in this case, I want to know what is their distance from a given point. Well, how am I going to do that? I could, here, absolutely valid, I could have only a single flat list of entities and just simply sort that list by their distance to my given point. Totally a valid way to do it. The problem is anytime I access that list, if I wanted the distance, I don't have access to the distance. I always have to recalculate it. So That's an interesting idea. I know. How about if I just simply tack that distance onto the end of the entity definition? Well, okay, kind of a neat idea. But then it's going to make that entity definition, um, illegal. I mean, it won't, I'll probably generate an error if I try to do anything with it. Okay, that's a horrible idea. Okay, what if I have two lists? One will be the entities, and I keep the distances in another list. Okay, that's an equally bad idea. So let's think about, okay, what are we going to do with our data? What's the whole point here? Is I want to kind of process the drawing. I want to take the blocks that are closest to my given point, and I want to do something with it. So it's, thinking about what data do I really need? I really do want the data, the distance, and I might want to, for instance, modify the entity. So that really kind of just simply means that I'm going to end up with something like this. I'm going to end up with an overall list, and each member will be, of course, its own, whoops, sorry, accidentally clicked. Each member will be its own list, and of nothing more than the distance and the entity. It'd be very simple. So if I can create this sort of ad hoc list, I can sort it by that distance number. So I will have a list of all of my entities sorted by the distance to a given point. And and so a couple just super, super quick little things to ponder on that is, this is a very specific kind of a ad hoc list for this one purpose. Now, if I'm doing something else, I want to sort entities by what layer they're on. Well, then I could do just a similar variation where this is the layer. Or maybe I want to come up with a kind of a standard data structure that I can use for kind of any purpose. I mean, you can break your brain on this, but for this purpose, I'm thinking the simpler the better. I want to make a very simple control list for this one purpose, and we'll kind of go from there. Lastly, we need to talk about selection sets. And there's just two functions really that I really need to worry about. SSGet, very, very powerful, has a lot of different modes in calling it. But X is the one we're dealing with. X is everything in the entire DWG. So that will return a selection set of all entities in the drawing, which is fantastic. That's exactly what I want. Unfortunately, a selection set is not what you might think it is. It's not just simply a list. That would be kind of a little more pure to Lisp. It's not a list of entities. It's a selection set of entities. So unfortunately, it's its own data type. And so that means the only way to access the entities inside that selection set is by using the SS name, the selection set name function. So for instance, given any selection set, given that selection set, SS name 0 of that selection set, you see how it has two arguments to SS name the set, and then which one from 0 to, of course, however many is in there. That will return the entity name of that selection set, which is of the first entity in the drawing. So I'm going to show that in operation in just a couple seconds. But like I said, we have to divert for just a moment regarding ribbon. I want to just show this because from this point out, we want the ease of having a ribbon with a custom of all of my custom code and custom buttons and all that. So here's the real basics to doing it. All of your AutoLISP customization should be organized and organized in this fashion. I'm going to have a custom CUI file, and I'm then going to have an MNL file that's of the same exact name. Interestingly, I don't specify that in the CUI. All I do is name the MNL file exactly the same as the CUI file. And all that is Lisp. It's actually menu Lisp is what MNL stands for. So what happens is, of course, all this will be organized in a folder that is in the support file search path so that when AutoCAD loads the CUIX, Like I said, it won't look inside the COIX for what additional Lisp to load. It'll look for just simply an MNL of the exact same name, exact same location, and it'll then load that Lisp. But what you don't want to do is put all your Lisp in an MNL file. You want to instead just simply have the MNL file load your Lisp file or load your Lisp files, plural. And that's what's going to give you the flexibility to have different menus, different loadouts, organize your Lisp files differently. And then you're lastly going to have a little images folder for all the toolbar buttons. So I'm going to show that too. But I'm going to pause here for a very quick second and see if any questions rolled in.
No questions so far, so good time to remind everybody to get that Q&A box up and ready to type some stuff so that we can get that answered as they come in.
Fantastic. So let me just jump on over here. So here we are. Here in CAD, I have my support file search path, and I have my folder right here. In that folder, in this folder there is my CUI file, there is my MNL file, and then again, this is part of the flexibility, is I chose to change now the naming. I'm calling this, and for the purposes of this entire webinar, I'm using just XX as my example of my firm's acronym or my initials. This is going to be my very standard way of organizing all my files and all of my code that I write. Is you want to come up with a 2, 3, or 4 character prefix to everything that you do. That hopefully isn't also a very common one that's already taken by some other AutoLISP programmer that you're sampling their code from the internet and trying to integrate it and all that. So you kind of want to come up with your own little unique prefix. But in this case, I have my standard menu, but then my tools Lisp might be loaded by any number of menus. So that's just why I wanted to be able to vary the naming. And so what happens is the CUI will load, and then it'll look for that MNL, and here's that MNL. And this is all that needs to be in there, is if the Lisp file that I want is in the support file search path, that's what find file is, it'll load it. If it's not in the support file search path, it'll just simply alert the user that it's not in the support file search path. Pretty darn simple. And there literally, you don't need anything more in an MNL file than that. But of course, obviously you could go, well, I could load 3 or 4 Lisp files. Yeah, sure, you could. And that's certainly what you could do. But I would definitely recommend keeping it as simple as possible. So then it's going to load this code. So let's see what we got here. But first, I need to show the rest of the ribbon. Let's get that out of the way. Sorry. Okay, so here's the tool that we made last time. I've now already given it a button and put it in the ribbon. Remember my layer color tool? Remember this one? We made this last time. So that is here. But let me jump into the CUI, and I'm just going to show you very quickly how we do this in the CUI interface. If you have not created the CUI first, you do that very quickly by going to the transfer button, clicking new, and then immediately clicking save. That's all you have to do. So I've done that. And so now in the customize tab, I can select that CUI file. Well, of course, I've loaded it. I might need to load it first. But anyway, I've got this custom CUI file. It's very quick and easy. And of course, there's other, certainly webinars and videos on the internet to show you how to work with it. But I'm going to show you the very basics, which is in my ribbon, I've established a tab and I've created a panel. Now that I have that panel, I can drag that into the tab. And now I'm literally done with the tab portion, and all my other work is here in the panel area. When I create a panel, which I did, this one just automatically creates with all of this. And I created a tool and dragged it in here. Let's make another one. Our new one is the one we're working on, which is going to be find closest. And the macro, it always starts with the CC. All that the CC is as if the user hit Control-C or Escape twice. to make sure that, nothing was running. It's not necessary, and just for clarity, I'm just going to do this again. My prefix, and then find closest, and then my small image and large image, and I used my incredibly lacking image editing skills. Find closest 16 and find closest 32. Please do not judge me on my utter inability to draw. So there, I've made a command, find closest. And so now I can just simply drag that into the panel. Oh, where'd he go? So the wonders of the CUI. There he is. Okay, so there he is there. And notice he's little tiny. So let me just see what's going on. Aha. See, when I click on the tool, this is really fun. There's very little information here. When I click on it in the panel, I have all this additional data, primarily the button style. I don't want small. I want large with text. There we go. Find closest. See, I was going for, given that dot in the center, which of these other dots is closest, but that's a horrible design. Anyway, but that's it. We're all done with the ribbon at that point, because now, look at that. There it is. Now I can click that button, which is going to fire, in this case, right? I already loaded the Lisp, fires that, and it fires where it says alert ready. Oh, we're ready. Remember, I also have my reload tool. I can type RRR to reload. That reloads my code really quickly. So that means I can check and make sure everything's working. Let me reload. And so now when I click my tool again, it says ready to. So the changes are affecting. Everything is firing on all cylinders. We're ready to rock and roll. Okay. What are we doing today? Select a block and find the closest. How are we going to do that? So just like before, remember how we do this is we start by writing it in comments. That's all we're going to start with. So let's see. I'm going to, I need to, well, like I said, I select a block, or I guess technically I select an entity. Then I get the entity info or definition, or however I want to call that. Should I make sure it's a block? That might be kind of important. But I know I need to kind of grab its insertion point. And then, well, I want to get all of that block, right? So, well, if I'm going to get all of that block, well, I guess while I'm grabbing its insertion point, I need to grab its block name. So, and then I need to grab all of that block. Then I'm going to, I guess process those blocks, calculate distance to that start point, and somehow I'm going to sort that list that we were talking about, that control list. And then I'm going to do something with that list. What am I going to do? Are we going to, why don't we draw a line to the closest, and, now that I think about it, it might be kind of cool to draw a line to the, X closest, like the 5 or the 3, or, someone might want to know what the 2 closest are, or something like that. So, okay, so we've got a vague outline here of what we're doing. And so let's get going. Like I mentioned last time, what I recommend is making a copy of this and then kind of pasting it here and turning it into code there. But I'll just go ahead and do this kind of in line here. So I want to select an entity. Well, I know how to do that. We learned that one last time, int cell. And I need to set that to a variable. I think eCell's a fine name for a variable. I created a variable, I add it to my local variable list here, and I also prep to comment it. Okay, all just being meticulous as possible. And even right away, why don't we click save, because also the way I'm doing this, the last line of code here will get spit out at the end. So that means if I reload, click, and I have, in my drawing, I created a little fire hydrant. Good. Click him. There we go. Look at, we're moving right along. So this entity selection clearly returned this. It returned an entity name and a point. And I go, oh, wait a minute, there's a point. Hey, this might be kind of a neat way to do this. I click, let me click, and I thought I noticed something weird. I did, look, it's a different point. So important, it's handy in some purposes, is that returns the entity name and the point clicked. So whether I clicked it here or over here. So that's just, that's cool for some purposes, just not for ours today. I do still need the insertion point of that block. So all I care about is the entity name. And so to get that entity info, I know I need the car, the first element of that entity selection. That's the entity name. And I'm just going to feed that right to int get. So I int get it, and then I need to feed that to my variable. I need a variable name. What is this? It's the selection entity. I'll give it a name. I don't know. It's the source object. How about that? Sounds like a good enough name. Add that here, and of course, and I'll stop worrying about the comments here, but I think I've made my point enough. Always include good comments, what your variables are, what you're using them for. And so, but at this point, I can save, reload, test. Boom, there it is. So I've got maybe I can give myself even a little more room here. Got that entity definition. That's everything I need is in here. There's the block name, the to group. I don't even necessarily have to, like I said, access the documentation on those DXF numbered groups. A lot of times it's pretty obvious. That's clearly the block name. And let's see, in here probably, kind of, because it wraps a little. Look at that. There's my insertion point, the 10 group. So I wanted that. Oh, that's right. Thank gosh I remember that. I'm getting ahead of myself. Make sure it's a block. That's a great idea. That's this, remember? So it's an insert. So that means I want to make sure that the DXF, am I typing that right? The DXF0 of source, right? Make sure that equals insert. I want to make sure that's true. Actually, I can double check that real quick, right? I can reload. Click on this. Oh, look, it returns T for true. That's my Boolean T for true. Remember that? So when we're going to need to put some sort of if and sort of thing in here. For now, whatever, we know that's what we want to do. I'm going to comment that out and keep on moving here. I need to get the insertion point. Okay, what's the insertion point? We'll call that point 0 for, I don't know, so again, you could kind of kill yourself with proper naming of things. Yes, it's good to do things. I'm naming these variables in kind of a classic AutoLISP sense. A far more modern style in programming languages would be to call that variable insertion point. You're welcome to do that. And is that easier to read and easier to see? Yes, you probably should do that. But sorry, I'm a little old school. I'm going to call it P0. And that's DXF10 of the source. And remember, I got to declare my local variable. I want to get the block name. Okay, that's easy enough. B name, we'll call that DXF2 of the source. We're just moving right along, aren't we? B name. Okay, well now comes the hard part. I need to grab all in the drawing of that block. Oh boy. Well, I'm going to do what I saw in the PowerPoint. I'm going to do SSGetX. That's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to set that to a temporary selection set variable. Or I can call it mySS, or I don't know. And this is another, like I said, this is another great example. I started typing all of mine as tempSS years and years ago, so I've got thousands and thousands of lines of code where the variable's named tempSS. So all of this code is a little more portable, function to function, by keeping consistent variable names. So, or I could do a search and replace on all of my code and upgrade my standards, but for now, I hope this isn't I hope these variable names are easy enough to follow for you guys. So I have that selection set. Let me just make sure that's working. I have a selection set. Well, now what? Now, how the heck do I process that? Well, let's see here. Well, if we looked into it, we'd find out there is this SS length. That noise is going to drive me crazy, isn't it? There's 8,049 objects in the drawing. Am I really going to process all of those? And so here's an idea. I could read the documentation on SSGit and find out there's lots I can do with it. I'm going to show you that right now. But what I'm going to do is make this a little cleaner to read. Always, always, always add your trailing comment. Don't ever not. Pick a cool style. Some people do the, underscore, underline thing. I just do that. But, do something because it's going to make it clear, even though you're using Ultra Edit, it's keeping this nice highlight for you, letting you roll things up real nice, but still always put your trailing comments. But anyway, so this grabbed everything. Well, the cool thing you can do with SSGit X is I can pass it an arbitrary list that matches the entity definition that I want. And what I mean by that, remember when I showed this, I can create my own dotted pair just like it's an entity definition. Well, I can, that's as like a stub of an entity definition, because obviously it'll also have, well, all that other stuff that we saw, all this. I can create a filter in here of any or all of that, which is really cool. Exactly what I want to do, but right out of the gate, I want to see if this is working. And, here, hold on. I accidentally did not undefine the render command. So maybe RRR to reload is not the best choice. Maybe I should use another character code, but at least now I mistype it as RR. It'll fire better. Okay, what do we got now? 8. The length of that selection set is 8. There are 8 blocks in this drawing. Well, that's certainly a lot less than 8,049. That's a lot better. So, but we don't want all blocks, right? We wanted this block. Same thing. So we can continue creating this. We wanted the 2 to be, whoops, not in quotes, B name, spelled right. B name. Find closest, click on it. Oh, it's down to 6. And of those 6, one of them is this guy. So here's the big dilemma is, do I filter him out? I need to filter him out because obviously he's closest to himself. But do I filter him out at the SSGit level or down here when I process this selection set somehow? And I'm just going to cut to the chase on what I'm going to go with. I want him in the selection set for a very important reason, because I want the selection set to exist. Because see, look at this. Let's just say, for instance, I was trying to grab a selection set for something that didn't exist. I'm getting an error. And again, this is due to my very handy error function, setting my local area error variable to my very simple error function, so that in this case, I had an actual error and it got backtraced. But if I ever use the exit function or the user hits escape, it'll have a nice clean exit. It's all I need for that error function, and that is really helping me write my code. In this case, SS length nil. So what a pain. If this returns nil, it's going to break all kinds of stuff, which means I kind of have to add a if this exists and all this other stuff. So what I'd rather do is just make sure that the original thing I selected is in here. I should still be aware that I might need to add some, if else code or something regarding that if it exists. But what I'm going to do is, whoops, I actually didn't mean to delete that. I have the length of temp SS. So how am I going to process this now? And that is with, well, a while loop, essentially. While what? Well, I have the length, and that's really kind of all I have. That's really what I'm showing is kind of the best way to do this. There's one other way that I see a lot of other programmers use, and I just think this is more flexible. So while what? Well, I is less than the length. And the end of the loop, the increment I, but I didn't set I to an initial value. Okay, so do we see what's going on here? I grabbed my selection set it to temp SS. I set my little counter variable to 0. And I think this might be the first time I showed doing this with a set queue is I can set this variable. I can set another variable. I can set as many variables as I want inside one set queue. So that's kind of handy. Okay, but I have a selection set and I have my variable while I is less than it. So I is 0 at first. This was 6 or something. And we're going to do something. And then I gets incremented. So then I becomes 1 and then 2, 3, 4, 5. And then finally at the end, it's higher than the length. And then this while loop ends. So I'm going to be able to process my selection set. And then what can I do with it? And like I said, there's really only one thing I can do with it. The SS name of that selection set to the I, to the nth, be the first, the 0th, and the first, second, third, fourth, and so on. And that's an entity name is what that returns. So I have to then immediately feed that to int get. And then I need to immediately feed that to a variable. Let's see what we got. Okay, I've got that. I'm going to need more because you know what I need, right? I got the entity. What am I saying? I kind of have my outline here. Stay with the outline. That's easy. Oh yeah. Calculate the distance to the start point. Oh, okay. Well, how are we going to do that? Well, luckily, there's an easy way to do that. There's a distance function. This couldn't get easier. The distance from P0, my start point, to this guy. And we know what this guy is. He's going to be the complement. He's going to be the DXF10 event. That was easy. So we'll call this variable dist. Okay. And let's see, where are we going? So we've got the distance. We got to add to the control list. Didn't really say that. See what we're doing is I need to be creating that control list. So, all right, we're adding to my control list. So remember, we're going to append to it. So we're going to append and, however I want to kind of make the code look good here, but I'm going to add on to the control list, right? Just like in that example, my new thing that I have to elevate to a list first. I elevate it to a list. And then what am I putting in here? I'm putting in itself a list of the distance and the entity. That's my control list. And so I think, that's going to drive me crazy if I don't correct that. Okay. I think that's good. And so at this point is a great point to put in an access panel. Discussed this last time. See how I even put the code like that? I'm going to print my control list. It's case insensitive, but you can see I'm using the uppercase very purposely. It's obviously a very important variable. And so it's very nice to have a case insensitive language let me get away with stuff like that. But I'm going to leave this here forever. When I'm done, when this is all ready to go, all I do is comment it out. And then when I ever come back and have to work on this function again, I can just uncomment it. And it's very clear where this is. So these little access panels are very important when you're programming. So where are we at here? I click my guy. And right away I'm like, okay, wait, oh boy, this is just, it looks like it is what I said. I have a list. And then here's that first member of the list is the distance and then the entity. And it's a lot. It's a lot of information for such a simple thing. And I'm like, what am I doing here? And when it comes down to it, maybe I should look down here. What am I going to be doing with this control list? Right? I said, I'm going to draw a line. And I might draw a line. What am I going to do? I'm like, you know what? I don't need all of its information. All I need is the other point, the other insertion point. So that's kind of a cleaner way to do this. I'm going to go ahead and give myself a little room here. Do that. Give me, I like this past the error. There we go. I need another variable. What if I do it this way? PX is my DXF10 of the entity. And plus, this code is just looking a little cleaner. See, it's very clear and easy to read. That's imperative. So that's the distance, and instead of the whole entity, I just want the point. What's that look like? Well, hello, look at that. Distance, point. Distance, point. Distance, point. That's really neat, isn't it? So that's really working. So all I need to do, I need to sort it. There's one other thing I do need to do, of course, which is figure out how I'm going to deal with the fact that this guy is in here. And like I said, we're basically here, typical programmer quandary. Do I filter him out at the SSGet? Do I put an if then in here? Do I filter after I sort it? His distance to himself will certainly be 0. I could just simply drop him at that point. What feels best? I don't know. What I'm thinking is I want this to look more standardized. And what do I mean by that? And that means I want this. Let me get this I'll get that out of here for now. So if you can see what I'm doing here, give myself a little space. There we go. What if I do this? What if the DXF5 of int is not the DXF5 of my source? And I purposely used and. Why would I use and if that's the only thing I'm filtering here? I'll tell you why, because look at how easy I can add on to this code now. It was built to be added on to. If I wanted to do any additional filtering at this point, it's ready to go. And I can even say, put a comment in here, additional filter right here, And speaking of that, speaking of useless ands, another thing I didn't do, like I mentioned, is, where was that? Here. Remember, I set my selection set, and then I'm immediately firing an SS length on it. There's a potential for this to be nil, like I said, in some cases, if I screwed this up. There's a couple ways to handle it. I can put an if statement here, and I can indent all of this code, or I can also do this. And I once got derided on a forum for posting this code. So I'm sticking to my guns. Yes, this is mostly irrelevant because temp SS will hopefully be valid the whole time this while loop is going. So it's quote unquote needlessly checking to make sure the selection set exists multiple times. Yes, you are adding thousands of unnecessary clock cycles to this. which will take a whopping additional 0.25 milliseconds. But the beauty of that is I am gaining an additional exit clause to this loop. Let me roll this up as an example. I'm inside this while loop. If I don't have the and temp SS, the only way I can exit this loop is by making this statement fail. So that means to exit the loop, I would have to set I to SS length temp SS. And what I'm saying is by putting this here, I can exit the loop by this. And you may say that's potato, tomato, whatever, but I'm saying this to me visually looks more like an exit clause. This to me looks like just a line of code. And so I just think that it's cleaner, it gives me more flexibility, that this is generally your really good entity processing loop. And kind of expand this as well, like I said, by even rolling this up, this framework is a real cornerstone of your AutoLISP programming. Exactly like that is. So, take a screenshot, etch that into your brain. So I've made sure that this entity is not my source. And if I wanted additional, I've got his point. I calculated his distance. I added that to my control list. I've got my control list. I want to remind myself everything is working great. Where are we? Sort the control list. Okay, let's do that. How do we do that? Well, let's find out. Luckily, there's an easy way to sort a list. Boy, when was this added? This was added to AutoLISP in like the year 2000 or something, when all the VL functions were added. So if you can imagine, a lot of these things, like, we could have calculated the distance. We could have done, a squared plus b squared minus c squared. We could have done some geometry between those 3 points and calculated it, written our own distance function, but we don't have to. In the same way, we don't have to write a sorting function. We can just use this. So look at this. It just says VL sort a list based on a comparison function. And, look, they give an example right here. Oh, this couldn't be easier, everybody. We're moving right along. I can set my control list to VL sort. Sort that control list, just like it shows. I like typing quote rather than the shorthand of the apostrophe, just because, again, it makes my code a little more portable. But personal preference, but I think it's portable and easier to read this way. And again, I have this access panel here. I'm going to leave him there. Like I said, I want to, as I am working on the code, I might want to see what the control list looks like after that while loop, but not right now. Now I want to see what it looks like after sorting it. Right? Let's see what that looks like. Loaded, find closest, click my guy, error. Oh, VL sort, what's my error? Again, without that backtrace, do you know how hard it would be if it just simply spit out the actual error? Bad type for compare. You'd be searching through here trying to figure out what that means. Well, let's check this. What do you mean bad type for compare? Oh, look at that. You can use less than if the individual members of that list can be operated on with a less than. If I have a list in here, I gotta do a lambda function, which, honestly is fine. You just kind of wish the VL sort function could have been a little smarter and figured that one out. All right, let's do that. Fine. It's just one of those little things. You gotta do what you gotta do. Now I gotta lay it all out, throw it into a lambda function. Lambda's kind of fun though, because it's more real core Lisp, real core old ANSI Lisp. We're talking 1965. So, and it's really pretty simple. I can use my less than, but is the first element of A1 less than the first element of A2? Like I said, you'd think I could just make VL sort a little smarter. But it is what it is, right? Oh, this keeps popping over here. Hold on. Driving me crazy. Sorry. Okay, here we go. Oh, let's see what we got. 42, 94, 373. I think it's working, people. I think we're totally there. That list is sorted. We have the distance. We have the point. We are now approaching the end run here. Do something with that list, right? So let's see how much time we got left. We got a few minutes. Okay. What are we going to do? Like I said, I want to prepare to do something with the X closest. That seems like how I want this function to evolve over time. And I'm like, okay, well, so there's a few ways I can do that. Here's a pretty elegant way. I can repeat, let's say 3 times. I want the 3 closest. And I'm going to need a variable. Okay, I could go up here. I could make a brand new variable. Technically, I could reuse one of these. And you know what? I think, tough call. I'll reuse I. Now, granted, you could. This is or is not a good thing to do. Do or don't reuse variables. We're just going to move on for now. I'm going to set I to the first element of my control list. Okay, so that means that dist is the first element of I, and px is that second element of I, just everything I need. And then I'm gonna do something, and then I'm gonna set my control list to everything but the first element, to my seeder of control list. So see what I'm doing here. If I repeat this 3 times, I grab the first element of my control list, ready to do something. Then I set my control list, I kind of knock that first guy off to, everything that's remaining. And then do that. So if I do this 3 times, it'll be the first 3 elements. If I repeat it once, it'll be the 1 closest or the 5 closest. So this gives me a lot of flexibility in how I'm going to do this. And to do something, for now, let's get something going here, right? Let's get to the eyes on the prize. Let's draw a line. What's line? I'm learning how to type. From P0 to PX. Hit enter at the end. Like we showed in the first webinar, that's how fun it is with list. I can just fluidly put in a command line call like that to get something done. Reload. Find closest. Click my guy. Hello, look at that. Drew a line to the 5 closest fire hydrants in here. That's pretty neat. And right away, I'm like, well, I already want to make this better. A line? Lines are for suckers. How does that dim aligned work? Dim aligned. See, here. Oh, there's a third prompt, isn't there? That third prompt would ideally be midpoint, wouldn't it? That would sure be pretty cool. We don't have enough time. So we don't have enough time today, but we can still do that. About 2 minutes left here. So there is that third prompt. I can't do midpoint, so for now I'll just drop in that trailing point. Let's see what this looks like. Boom. So now I got a dimension created to the distance to that fire hydrant. So that was fun, wasn't it? So a real quick couple little housekeeping things on this. Obviously, boy, we could go crazy with where we're going from here. What layer was that created on? What dim style was it created with? Did I turn off ortho? Did I turn off OSNAP? This needs a lot of housekeeping items added to it, unfortunately. I need to end with a clean exit now that it's getting all nice and clean. I also need to add my error handling in. Remember where I Here we go. I made sure it's an insert. I need to put some sort of if block in here. Um, Along the lines of, I could kind of do something like this real quickly. I could do a if and, and I select, and it got the info, and it's an insert, and at that point, that's all I care about. Basically, then continue. So I could kind of roll this up. Oh, I think what I'd probably do is I'd roll these guys up like so. Again, combine this into one set queue. And then here, otherwise, I need to exit. And I have that ability because of my really nice air handler. I can just clean exit. So that way, when I reload, fire it again, if I click on something that's not a block, it just exits. Yeah, so maybe I could alert. I could, we can keep adding code to this forever, people. So this is pretty much done. I hope there's some questions kind of rolling in. I know we're kind of just about to run over. But what do you think, Jake? Any questions?
Yeah, so we just got one asking if you return dim defaults to midpoint of dim line. So I don't know if that's more of a comment. Maybe he's saying if you hit return the dim style defaults to the midpoint.
Oh, no. Oh, I wish. Yeah. I think he's saying if instead of putting that point last, this was, yeah, let me get like I said, these, what layer is it on? Is there a quick ability to clear that layer? That would be nice. So I try this. Whoa, what's going on there? It just doesn't work. So when I fire dim aligned from a command function like that, it really doesn't like this. It's like, does it need text in here? What does this thing need? See, look, the command is still hot. So it's just a nightmare. So when you automate a dimension via AutoLISP command, it really wants a point here. So like I said, what I really want is I need a new function, right? I would have my new function, XX midpoint, P0, PX is where this is going. That would be badass. But we don't have time to do that today. So that's why we're just going to feed it that second point for now.
Cool. And then more of a comment, Kyle is just mentioning, just from a sorting and a Lisp naming standpoint, he typically uses the first letter of a firm's name and a dash so you don't override AutoCAD command stuff.
Right.
Stuff like that. So I guess that's more house cleaning items if you have anything else.
Exactly. Yeah, you want to be, and that's what I was going to mention. Yeah, you got to be careful with the two things you have to be really careful with. The one you most have to be careful with is really, frankly, your variable naming, because you're doing that so rapidly and you convince yourself that it's a local variable so it doesn't matter, and you do something silly like, okay, I need a temporary variable, so I'm going to set t to 0. Well, you can't set t to 0 because that's t for true. And so that's another reason you want to use a development environment that is highlighted. You can see a little bit. I could edit that color, but the T is different. Look at how the highlighting color changes as soon as I take it away from being a reserved word. See, table search is a reserved one, but table circ is not. So again, to like that comment on, that is totally a valid thing too, is all of these, frankly, instead of being named variables, could all be rolled up into an associative list. So that frees me from some naming restrictions. But so that's why, yeah, I'm being careful to put my firm prefix on my commands. This one I got away with because it's so ridiculously common, but otherwise all my functions should start with something unique to avoid that name collision. Definitely something you got to be wary of.
Yep.
But again, everybody, let me kind of know where you'd like this to go, if you want this to go further with a future session. and that'd be great. Anything else to mention, Jake?
Just scroll to the top of your Lisp there,
Uh-huh.
because Stephen was sort of wondering how you kept reloading so fast, and I tried to explain. That was in the first one that we did, right? In the first webinar.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you definitely want this. The two very key elements of this is, it's a C colon, so it's a command. I'm creating that as something I don't have to hit a parenthesis for, so I can say RRR. And very importantly, I know it drives you crazy hearing it over and over again. You put the alert in here too, and I'll show you really quickly why. Let's just say I didn't have that in here, okay? And let me put in a mistake. Reload. I'm moving along. Reload. I don't know why things are not working. You see, if I have the alert is in there. Actually, I guess I didn't need to remove the alert. I'm sorry. But you see, by not seeing the alert, I know something was wrong. See, because it never got the alert. So it kind of draws my attention because you're reloading so many times. So this way, reload. Okay, good, it loaded. So you definitely want that. You need these little tricks in there so you don't just tear your hair out over the simplest little things. So, and I see Stephen just piped in with a good one. Yeah, it's true. You could say instead of alert loaded, fine. I guess I could say Princey loaded, and then it's you know right right there at the bottom. But all right, I don't know. I just me. I like the alert. I'm sorry. I like something in my face knowing things are okay. But anyway, hey, I think we're gonna have to wrap this one up. Wish everyone a great weekend, and like I said, please send us some emails on kind of where you'd like this to go if we go with another session, because obviously, kind of the sky's the limit. We could go with these housekeeping items of like layer management and OSNAP and ortho, but those are kind of boring. So maybe we do something more fun. So, all right, have a great weekend.